Montgomery pretty animatedly calling out the team after the practice yesterday, or 2 days ago in the morning skate yesterday, that they were going to get humbled if they came out against the Sharks or anybody else like that. And obviously there's some, built-in sort of excuse, whatever, jet lag, flight to the West Coast, that, early in the season, they've had a lot of days off and not played a lot of games. I think there's a lot of factors that could have thrown into that, but I thought it was very interesting from a couple of different perspectives that this happened this early in the season. And, part of it is certainly, Montgomery saw something he didn't like. And the other part of it is, I think we're already seeing it with him where he knows he's going to have to coach this team a little differently this year than he did last year with Bergeron gone and with a lot of different personnel. I think there's definitely different buttons and lever he's going to push and levers he's going to pull as a head coach to get the best out of them. Dupes, what did you make out of that?
Yeah, great subtlety to note. I sat down with Montgomery, in the last few days of training camp, trying to tease out this very point from him. Was he going to change his approach at all? And he didn't say he would, but clearly he has. And I think it's a product of two things. First of all, Bergeron and Krejci are gone, and also that they face planted in the playoffs. And part of that was the coach didn't respond under the heat.
Yep.
And I think he got the message from the front office. I think he got the message because he's an intelligent hockey guy himself, and he's not going to be standing there. If he notices it, he's going to act on it.
Welcome to another edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast. As always, I am your host, Joe Haggerty. You can find my work at joehaggerty.substack.com. Join for a premium membership to get all my content sent to you. You can also find it now at the Boston Sports Journal. I'll be writing 3 columns a week for them, mostly around game coverage. Maybe we'll beef it up a little bit in the playoffs, but shout out to Greg Bedard. I'm glad to be on that site and connecting with him and getting more Bruins content out to you guys. Thanks, as always. We got, as Kevin Paul DuPont called it, the Les Miserables edition of the Pucks with Haggs podcast here, the Boston Globe's Kevin Paul DuPont, the Boston Herald's Steve Conroy. Thanks very much for joining us. And real quick, before we get into it, just want to thank our sponsors, Fanduel Sportsbook. Make a $5 bet right now. You get $200 in bonus bets. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. Download the app, start betting away. The NHL season is here. FanDuel.com/Boston to get going. And also Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Ready in 2 minutes, chef-made, very healthy meals, delicious meals too. I've had plenty of them. They're very good. So go to Factor Meals. We'll give you more information on that at the end of the podcast. Dupes and Steve, thank you very much for joining us. I haven't talked to you, I think, since the season started. Just your thoughts on not only the last win over the San Jose Sharks last night on the West Coast, but just the first 3 games, what you make of this team. Steve, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, it's really hard to know what to make of the team. They've got 3 wins against 3 teams that no one really expects, are going to be in the playoff picture. Maybe we reassess Nashville. They had a good win the other night against New York.
If Bedard really goes supernova, maybe the Blackhawks get into if he turns out to be this amazing player. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean they got handed it to them pretty good last night in Colorado. So we'll see. It's really hard to say. Offensively, they're going to have to work for their goals. They've got a third line and a fourth line. I'm just not sure how the first and second lines are going to configure, and that's a concern. So we'll know a lot more about them after they play the LA Kings tomorrow night. We won't know everything. One game doesn't make or break a season, but it's going to be a pretty tough test against that. That team that has 3 really good centermen right down the middle with Dubois, Kopitar, and Donnell.
Yeah, and I mean, my first column for Boston Sports Journal will be out soon. Basically, and I've written about this a couple times. I think really, and we all think this, defense and goaltending is going to be the name of the game for this Bruins team this year. I think we're going to see a lot of 3-1, 3-2, 2-1 games that we've already seen here, where they're going to come out on top because the defense and goaltending is outstanding. And you look at the team rankings right now in the NHL. second in goals against right now, second in save percentage with a 952 save percentage. Obviously really early, just a few games into the season, but they're like middle of the pack, 15th or 16th in NHL in offense. That's definitely, if not even worse offensively, where I expect the Bruins to be this year. And I think that's sustainable to be a playoff team, but I think we're going to see a lot of what we've seen in the first few games, and it's going to be tougher to do against better competition. Dupes, your take on the first 3 games here.
Yeah, all of what you guys are saying. And first, Haggs, congrats on the Bedard venture.
Thank you.
Yeah, good for you. Good for Greg and the product. So a number of things here, which is and again, I can't contradict anything you've said here, other than to add that it's really impossible to kind of forecast what the offense is going to be because of what we talked about from the outset. You've got the offense is going to coalesce around your centerman, as it always does, and we still don't know about the 1, 2, 3, 4 order. Patra looks like a decent prospect. Whether he's going to stick or not, we don't know.
Yep.
The 2 big centers. What I suppose what's impressed me most, and hardly this jumps off the charts, but is I've been impressed with Frederick's play, because wherever they're putting him, he's more than I've seen from him. Yep. Now, does that mean I'm going to say the same when we do this again in a couple of weeks? I don't know. But that's caught my eye. Patra's caught my eye, but we'll see there when you see how Bedard struggled last night against the Avs. So when it's up against the 6'2", 6'3" guys who are have full game, they're men. Let's not forget, these are kids. Joe Thornton had 7 points his first season. So you've really got to kind of really take it. Now, on the same hand, Sergei Samsonov was Rookie of the Year that year, and right. had a very productive season and was a smaller guy. So I would say, all in all, thus far, too small a sample size. Encouraging that they've won their 3 games. There's only a handful of teams right now who are undefeated. That's a good start, and we'll see just where. Again, I think it's going to be 2 issues for me. How does the offense coalesce around all these question marks in the middle? And do they have some thump on the back end? I think losing Connor Clifton was obviously it's not a monumental deal, but I like that snarl when it was there.
Yeah, and he brought a different look than a lot of the defensemen on that core right now bring, and they missed that for sure. There's no doubt about that. And there were some things to take from last night's game that were encouraging, I guess, offensively. All the goals were even strength goals. That's something Jim Montgomery wanted to see, and that's why he changed the forward lines going into that West Coast trip. He had nice things to say about, to your point, Dupes, Coyle, Frederick, and JVR skating together as a line, kind of a third line, big puck possession line, work in the front of the net, and some of those dirty, just get it in the net and scramble and keep punching until it goes in kind of goals. That's what that line's going to have to do, and I think they will be able to do it with the size and the guys that are on that line. So it'll be interesting to see if that stays. But there are things that are not sustainable about what we're seeing right now offensively too. Pasternak's got 4 goals in 3 games, and he scored in every game. And he's probably going to score in most games, but I don't think he's going to be able to do that every night. And what are they going to get, and who are they going to get it from when he's not putting it in the net? I don't know that he and Zacha, I thought they were better last night, but I've still not seen a ton of chemistry out of Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak when Zacha is the center. That's certainly something to watch. But you also got to temper the expectation. I think we're going to know a lot more as far as answers go, or a little more anyway, after they play the Kings, to Steve's point. That's a quality opponent, really the best opponent they're going to face so far. So I think some of these questions are going to be answered. Did we see Patra sort of maybe not shrink, but like sort of step back from the forefront a little bit for the first time last night when he's been put into a bigger role? Now, he made a nice play that led up to Marchand's first goal, where he got the puck in the zone, threw it down below the goal line, and then got off the ice, and then Beecher came on and ended up setting up Marchand for the goal. That was a nice play he made there. But other than that, I thought he wasn't too visible in this game. Are we going to start watching a lot more closely the next handful of games leading up to this 9-game limit before they got to decide whether he's going to stay or not? Or do you, either one of you have your minds made up that he's probably here to stay, regardless of what we see in the next 5 games?
Well, I think he's probably going to stay. I don't know what kind of year he's going to have, but I don't think he would gain much from going back to Guelph at this point.
After a 95-point last season, too. He pretty much dominated that league last year.
Yeah. And, a game like last night was inevitable. I mean, I would have rather have seen him, play well against a team that's not very good. And, because he's going to have a tough time on Saturday night against whoever he's going to be matched up with, whether it's going to be Deneau or whoever. But yeah, he did make a nice play. That's kind of his patented thing where he curls up, inside the blue line and finds some space and creates, some possession for the team. Unless he completely falls off a cliff in these next 5 games, I think he's here to stay.
I see him more as a tweener at the moment. In a perfect world, which is kind of ridiculous to bring up, but I'll bring it up. That's what I do. I'd be far more encouraged about his ability to stick, his ability to be a contributor, if Krejci and Bergeron were still here and he was in a defined 4th line role. And, 4th line, you can get comfortable. You don't see the biggest checkers, all of that. If he's here and they're really going to be counting on him, I think that's a big ask right now, especially because not only are those 2 guys gone, it's still a question who's the 1 and 2 here. So I think the contributing factors here are their dearth of legit centermen and the cap situation. If the cap weren't here, they might have been able to go out and found a more realistic $2 or $3 million answer in there. Let's not forget that's kind of what Geekie was going to be, right? And now Geekie's in this sort of quasi center floor, which is fine. I mean, wherever he contributed, and I think he is a contributor. I like his size, I like his legs, but
he's been a good security blanket for the kid.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for Patra, definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm not holding out a lot. I mean, I like him. I think he was an excellent pick. I think he's going to be a player. I think if the expectations here are that he's going to be somewhat of a difference maker, and I'll be happy to eat these words. I don't see him at this size, this age, this team as being a difference maker.
Snap into action this NFL season with Fanduel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/Boston and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
I look at it a little differently in that. Let's not kid ourselves. This is a somewhat a transitional year, right? It's a kind of a rebuild on the fly, and he's going to have to take his lumps, and he's got to learn by playing. If they were a team with real Stanley Cup aspirations right now, I would say send them back. But they're trying to rebuild this thing, and he's got to get some NHL experience, and some nights it's going to be, some tough medicine. But I'd keep him.
Yeah, I would too. I mean, I think at this point he was a gift from the hockey gods, dropped into their lap, exactly what they needed. A young center with skill that they could be able to plug in with skill players like Brad Marchand and get something out of. And as I mentioned before, even though I didn't think he had a great night last night, and there were moments where he struggled and points he struggled, and there's going to be peaks and valleys to a 19-year-old kid playing in the league, he did make a really smart veteran play where he dumped the puck below the goal line and he got off the ice, and that set up the goal. And that's not something you see always 19-year-old kids do. Sometimes they're trying to do too much. Sometimes, they're going to try to make a play that's not there. Instead, he does the simple thing, gets off the ice and lets Beecher come on, and who I thought was one of their best players last night, Johnny Beecher. I thought he had a very good game. And you can see the penalty killing possibilities with him, with the speed, with the aggressiveness and the physicality. He's made to be a penalty killer, and he really seems to have found a home in that fourth line role. And he ends up setting up that play, and he set up Marchand later on too with that little one-handed push pass that Marchand went in on a quasi breakaway and didn't end up scoring. But there were definitely some positives and some players that I really liked watching. Beecher chief among them last night. But I think Patra's ceiling and his potential, they have to keep him because they don't have a better option. What are they going to do? Send him back to the OHL and bring Patrick Brown up? What I like Patrick Brown, God bless him, but what's he really going to bring to this team? You got to go with the higher end player that's got the much higher ceiling in Patra. Any guys to your mind that have not through 3 games, and it's early, we got to throw that caveat out there always, that have not lived up to expectations, that have not lived up to what they've done in the past, have struggled out of the gate a little bit. One of the ones I would mention, who I think has been up and down, is Jake DeBrusk. He hasn't put the puck in the net yet. He took a really bad hooking penalty last night that wiped out the last 30 seconds or so of one of their power plays. I just don't think he's where he needs to be. And frankly, in a year where it's a contract year, there's a lot of money on the table for him. I have not seen contract year kind of play out of him through the first 3 games to this point. But either DeBrusk, your thoughts on them, or anybody else you feel like hasn't lived up to expectations right now? Dupes, go for it.
I'd agree with that on Jake, which is not all that new. He can be streaky. He can take him time to play into his game, all of that. But to his side, if you will, I've always liked him better on the left side. I'd like to see them leave him on the left side and see if they've really got a legitimate rush line there, because he's got those legs, and it's his natural wing. If you're going to end up paying him, pick a number here, $6.5 million a year over, again, 7 or 8 years. Put him in his best situation, put him with his best guys. And I don't know if that's going to be opposite Pasta, and it's going to be Zacha or whomever. But to their benefit, to his benefit, I'd say leave him on the left side. He has to pick it up. And again, they're playing so many cupcakes here. It's hard to know exactly what they have and their readiness and their cohesiveness. Shattenkirk hasn't shown me a whole lot. And again, he's your third pairing guy. He's a cheap hire, yada, 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 yada. But would I like to see more there? That's probably me again, casting through I wish they had Connor Clifton here and somebody with a bit of a snarl.
A quick aside to both of you, and we'll start with you, Steve. Do you see a world in which the Boston Bruins are going to give Jake DeBrusk 7 years, $6.5 million to stick around here into his mid-30s? Because I'll be honest with you, I get the feel watching the way the negotiations are starting to play out. I get sort of Torrey Krug vibes with him, where it's going to be one of those players where thank you for your contributions. You've done a ton for us, but we're just not willing to go there with the term and the money to keep paying you. And it's going to be tough to do because he's a kid that can put the puck in the net. He's a top 6 forward. They don't have a plethora of those right now. But I feel like it might be one of those situations where he plays out the year and then he goes somewhere else because they're just not, frankly, willing to go that distance with a contract. Steve, what do you think?
Yeah, I thought of that as well. But like you say, by the end of Torrey's stay here, I thought he was a luxury that they could no longer afford.
Yep.
I'm not sure they can afford not to sign DeBrusk because they, like you say, they don't have much, a high scoring winger ready to plug in there. And, who knows what Lysell is going to be, if he's ever going to make it. So this is a tough one. There's no question about it. Pasta, that contract, he's a 50, 60 goal scorer. They'd find money for him.
Yep. This
guy's a little bit more of a, the next level down. And, sometimes those are the guys that are hard to, land on with the number. It's his performance so far. The good news is that he no longer has to get on the scoreboard every night for you to notice him. He's been great on the penalty kill. He's much better defensively. But that said, he's got to score. That's part of his job, and he hasn't done it, and he hasn't really gotten many chances either. And that's the concerning part.
Yep. Anybody else, Steve, that you've watched in the first 3 games and been not impressed with?
Not necessarily individually, but you alluded to it earlier. I'm not seeing that chemistry between Zacha and Pasternak.
Yeah.
And that's not a knock on Zach. I love the way Zacha plays. He works his tail off every shift. That back check last night was spectacular.
It was Bergeron-esque. It really was.
Yes, but offensively, I am not seeing them being copacetic right now, and that's a concern because they need to find Pasternak a center. He's gotten his goals so far, but haven't seen many tic-tac-toe plays this year.
We do have Factor Meals to help us out. America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit when it does get busy, when it does get crazy, when we do need a quick meal. They fuel you up fast with flavorful and nutritious ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. Takes less than 2 minutes to cook them. They're fresh, never frozen, meals ready in 2 minutes, like I said. They have calorie-conscious options, going upscale with some of the things they're offering now, like surf and surf meal options, roasted garlic filet mignon, and shrimp and Cajun spiced shrimp and salmon, which is like right in my wheelhouse. This is the kind of stuff I'm all about. So it's got everything for everybody. There's 34 plus chef prepared, dietitian approved weekly options for meals. You can get snacks, you can get breakfast items. Like it's a great deal. So if you want to get Factor Meals, go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use the code Haggs50 to get 50% off of your first box. It's a great deal. I've tried it. It's fantastic. I recommend it to you. We love these ready to make meal kits, especially when we're on the go with our kids. So one more time, that's factormeals.com/Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. You won't be sorry if you go to Factor Meals. It gets the Haggs thumbs up seal of approval. Do we also think it was, I thought the tweet from Fluto, who's out on the road with the team on the West Coast, talking about Montgomery pretty animatedly calling out the team after the practice yesterday or 2 days ago in the morning skate yesterday, that they were going to get humbled if they came out against the Sharks or anybody else like that. And obviously there's some, built-in sort of excuse, whatever, jet lag, flight to the West Coast, that, early in the season, they've had a lot of days off and not played a lot of games. I think there's a lot of factors that could have thrown into that, but I thought it was very interesting from a couple of different perspectives that this happened this early in the season. And, part of it is certainly, Montgomery saw something he didn't like. And the other part of it is, I think we're already seeing it with him where he knows he's going to have to coach this team a little differently this year than he did last year with Bergeron gone and with a lot of different personnel. I think there's definitely different buttons and lever he's going to push and levers he's going to pull as a head coach to get the best out of them. Dupes, what did you make out of that?
Yeah, great subtlety to note. I sat down with Montgomery, in the last few days of training camp, trying to tease out this very point from him. Was he going to change his approach at all? And he didn't say he would, but clearly he has. And I think it's a product of two things. First of all, Bergeron and Krejci are gone, and also that they face planted in the playoffs. And part of that was the coach didn't respond under the heat.
Yep.
And I think he got the message from the front office. I think he got the message because he's an intelligent hockey guy himself, and he's not going to be standing there. If he notices it, he's going to act on it. Whereas when you've got the leadership that he had before, I think, not that Bergeron was coaching the team, I don't want to go that far, but Bergeron on the bench and in the room and in practices and going out to practices had that pulse. I don't, there should be more in the room that have that pulse, but I think he's realizing just by that, and again, it's not a big deal, but he didn't do it before. It was always, and he didn't have to, the most successful team in the regular season in NHL history. But yeah, definitely. That caught my ear. And I think we're going to see more of that when the time comes, carpe diem, when the time comes, the coach is going to speak up, and that's a good sign.
I agree. Conroy, what do you think? Like, I took it as a very positive sign in that end of season press conference last year when the coaching staff, management all got up on the dais at the Garden, and point by point, Montgomery talked about where he thought he fell short as a coach and things that they could have done differently or things they're going to do better. Like, there was a lot of self-reflection and a lot of accountability, I think, that went into him thinking seriously about where things went wrong in the playoffs and what he could have done better as a coach and they could have done better as a group. And to your point, I think we're seeing him already start to apply that this year. And I think that's a very good sign because I think he is absolutely 100% going to have to coach this team much differently this year than he did last year.
Yeah, he's not blind. He sees the team that he has right now. Everybody knows, this is not the team that they had last year, even though we underrated that team too. But yeah. I mean, you lose, 8 or 9 guys and 3 of your 4 centermen. It's gonna require some coaching and some pointed words at times. Like you guys said, it was a good sign. If he has to do it every day, that's not a good sign. But it's good that he hopefully nipped it in the bud early. But we'll see. This may be a team that needs to whip a lot more often than they did last year when they really didn't need it all, because as Kevin said, you had Bergeron, everybody followed his lead. So this is not the same situation.
No, and I think there's probably going to be times where they're going to have to get blood out of a stone to score goals and to get offense out of this group, and it's going to require the coach to work them up into a frenzy a little bit more than he probably had to last year. Just anything league-wide, not even talking about the Bruins, anything league-wide that's sort of catching your fancy right now, caught your attention, something you're interested in, a trend, a team, anything like that, Dupes, that you've kind of seen in the first week, 10 days that's you've made note of?
Again, small sample size with not even a couple of weeks into it here, but Carlson made his debut last night for Anaheim, got a goal. I'm eager to see him.
Yep.
Is he going to be in that sort of Barkov Sundin mix in terms of a player who can be a franchise player? Certainly everything I've heard about him points that way. Again, one game.
Yep.
The Bedard thing. So I wouldn't say anything. Vegas at 5-0 certainly impresses me, coming off of winning the thing. And then, again, as every team has to, remodel or retool a little bit. I'm eager to see where Eichel goes here in his second year. Led them last year in scoring, to see if he really does ascend to that superstar center of attention type of player. Montreal's caught my eye because of shit luck again, to be frank. Losing Doc like that.
Yep.
Again, a guy who appeared to be moving into that role. No, there's been some disappointment. I thought Rangers would be better. I'm glad to see Detroit and Ottawa after the starts that I thought Detroit and Ottawa would have last year. Finally, they're coming around. So I guess that understand Buffalo being a disappointment too, at least, again, handful of games. So what those all underscore, and I think offer an interesting comparison to what the team we cover day to day is, boy, once you do become a real, bottom feeder, and I think we're quick in this town to say, oh, they lost that guy, they lost this guy, the coach left, they're not going to make it, and I'm guilty, believe me.
We all did the same thing this offseason with the Bruins that we did last offseason with them, and if thought they're going to fall off the precipice and they're going to go off the cliff, and obviously they're not going to be as good as last year, but they can still lose 30. They can lop off 30 points from what they did last year, and they're still going to make the playoffs.
That's right. So, but by my eye, they still have two excuse me, 2 elite goaltenders. They've got, I think the defense is overrated in often in terms of what Charlie is or he's going to be, but very good defense and 2 of the best wingers in the game. So you take those 5 or 6, you should be in the playoffs with those 5 or 6 players alone, unless you've got some meathead behind the bench, which they don't. They've got a sharp coach. They've got a good team. They've got wise guys in the front office, and I mean that in good terms, wise guys. So they should be there. But back to my point before I ramble on even more is when you see teams become bottom feeders, Ottawa, Detroit, Anaheim, man, it's a long climb back. Buffalo hasn't been in the playoffs since the invention of plastic sticks, right? I mean, it's just it's hard to watch those teams. It's hard for those fandoms to stay up. I suppose if anything, that underscores the luxury that sometimes Bruins fans don't realize. It's a bona fide team. Is it a bona fide cup contender? No, I don't think so, but it's a good, entertaining team.
And the common denominator with all those teams that you mentioned that become bottom feeders, I think, is that they all don't have stable goaltending situations. Like, I think that's when you fall off the cliff, and that's when you turn into just a bottom feeder lottery team, terrible franchise stuck in that in perpetuity, is when you can't land some kind of franchise goalie. You don't have two goalies that can work as a tandem together, whatever it is in this day and age where, there's not a lot of Vasilevskis around that are going to play, 60 to 70 games. If you don't have good goaltending in the league, you are going to be in that category, and it's going to be hard to get out. And, that's why I'm surprised by Buffalo, to be honest with you. I thought Devin Levi was going to play better than he has, and he's been okay. But, he's going through, I think, some of that, what we saw with Swayman, where he got a lot of reps and he came from college to the pros pretty quickly. And I think there's a big learning curve there for goalies, no question about it, when that happens. But great points. I'm a big fan of Greg Cronin. I'm interested to see how that whole Anaheim Ducks thing is going to shake out with Karlsson and everything out there. I'm even more curious to see how Trevor Zegras is going to respond to Greg Cronin, who is certainly going to challenge him to be much more of a two-way player and, play more winning hockey than try to be on highlight reels with Michigan goals. Steve, anything that stuck out to you just league-wide over the first couple weeks of the season?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how desperate Edmonton gets with goaltending. I know the new narrative is that, you don't really need, a good goalie, a frontline goalie.
No.
Ask Edmonton about that.
Right.
They've got, when they get Ekholm back up and running and playing like he can play, they'll be better defensively, I think. But to have the guys that they have up front, and granted their bottom six isn't great, but to have those two explosive guys and to have a guy like Ekholm in the back and be what they are right now is just unacceptable. And not having a goaltender just saps the confidence of the whole team. What would they offer the Bruins for one of their guys? That's an interesting question. My guess is that Allmark does not have Edmonton on his trade list, but who knows? I think probably Swayman would be probably an easier move than Allmark at this point. But I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself there.
Would you move Swayman if a trade was to be made there? Because if I were the GM of that team, under no circumstances would I move Swayman over Allmark. I'm going to do everything I can for Allmark to be that guy that I would package in a trade for a team that's desperate for goaltending. I just feel like Swayman's on a rise and ascension where he's going to turn into something pretty special for them. And I'm sure other teams see that too. And that's why they want him, in addition to being younger and less expensive. But even Allmark's not that expensive on his contract. But is there a universe where you would move Swayman in a deal rather than Allmark?
To Edmonton, it would be one of two trades probably.
Yeah,
Draisaitl or McDavid, and that's not happening.
Right. No, more likely than not, they'd want you to take Ryan Nugent-Hopkins instead.
Yeah, and I don't think I'd make that deal.
Yeah.
I don't think Nugent-Hopkins is a terrific third line center. He's okay in the top six, I think. He had a great year last year, 100 points. I believe he had 100 points last year.
Yep.
But I just don't see him as that kind of guy. Another thing that's interesting is how well that Vegas has come out, as Kevin mentioned. Winning the cup gives Cassidy, some free rein to coach the style that he coaches. But some of those guys even admitted, I think it was Marchessault admitted that he had to tell Bruce to step back a little bit during the playoff run. And if they don't win, then maybe this juggernaut doesn't take off, and Bruce has to adjust his style a little bit. But they win, so he can keep driving hard. So it'll be interesting to see if that stays on the rails.
I'll be interested to see too if like winning doesn't soften him, but like pulls back a little bit on how hard he's driving them. You know, if there was something in him that was just obsessed with winning the cup after coming so close and losing in 2019, that was part of what was turning him into that, taskmaster, hard driving kind of coach. And maybe that allows him to temper that a little bit too, just naturally. That's going to be interesting to see. Dupes, what do you think?
Well, I was impressed his whole time here, and some of that is clearly biased because he was so good to us, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
In terms of the coaches we've had to work for, he's first ballot Hall of Fame in terms of that.
That's right.
I always, the way these discussions with around Cassidy and the players always hit my ear is it underscores what a different breed today's player is. And I'm not saying that's bad, but Cassidy's approach even 20 years ago would have been considered kid glove, right? So the generation of how these kids have come along, the systems, the pandering, the recruiting, and we see this in the college in the U.S. market all the time, recruiting them to colleges at age 12 and 13 and slotting them in. There's a lot of cream puff built into the kids who come along. All I know is Cassidy has a tremendous point percentage. I almost said win percentage. I always have to temper that. Tremendous point percentage. It's effective. We saw him turning around on a dime here from the Julian era. You can be picayune about some decisions he made. Again, that's what we do. But boy, I think he's a tremendous coach. And that said, you can be all of that, but if the culture is what it is, and it's going to keep going that way, he, in very short order here, just by virtue of his makeup and genetic approach to the game, he may be out of the game because the players are too, and again, I hate to use the word, but let's use it, too soft, or they want to be too catered to. Yep. And the game in general is that way. In terms of feistiness, it's just not there.
And with us anyway, with us, he was always frank about player assessments with us. Yep. But I never found him to be belittling of players or mock a player. He just said it like it was. If you need a save, you need a save, and he'll tell you that. Yep. But you're right, Kevin. There's a sensitivity now that that wasn't there 20 years ago.
And you know what adds to the cream puff factor, and what I think is contributing to it, guys, and I'm seeing this at the youth hockey level, all these kids with the little wheelie bags that they're carrying into the rinks, where they're not carrying their own hockey bags anymore. Little Finn Haggerty at 10 years old is carrying his own hockey bag full of equipment over his shoulder into the rink, while all these other kids are pulling these little luggage bags on wheels with all their hockey equipment. So it starts at a very young age with all that stuff softening them up, and I'm not a big fan of it. But I am a big fan of both Steve Conroy and Kevin Paul DuPont. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me again this week. This is going to be another high-rated bonanza Pucks with Haggs episode, star-studded cavalcade here. Let me thank my sponsors real quick. Fanduel Sportsbook, $200 in bonus bets right now guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. App is easy to use, so download it. Spreads, player props, over-unders, so much more. Fanduel.com/Boston. And now that the NHL season's in full swing. And let's also thank Factor Meals, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit. Delicious meals in 2 minutes. Calorie-conscious options, dupes, in case you want to get back into swimsuit season way before the summer is here. Just fantastic meals, chef-prepared, very healthy. Go to factormeals.com/Haggs50 and use code Haggs50 to get 50% off your first box. Steve Conroy from the Boston Herald, Kevin Paul DuPont from the Boston Globe. Thank you very much, boys, for the conversation today. Let's do it again in a few weeks. Thank you for listening to the Pucks with Haggs podcast. We'll see you at the rink.